Hey guys, Tom here again from synthhacker.com. Welcome back to another tutorial for Massive. In this video we're going to be looking at making a really heavy, hard-hitting like French electro house bass, kind of in the style that Justice used a lot, and also in a couple of Lemaitre's tracks as well, however you say his name. I'm trying to do a French accent there. But yeah, it's just like a really kind of like heavy French electro house bass that you could use, you know, in other styles, just like just normal electro and complextro and dubstep and stuff like that as well. It's quite a complicated sound, so I'm going to try go through this one fairly quickly, but I'll still try and explain all the theory behind what I'm doing. So yeah, I'll just quickly show you the sound and then we'll get to making it. So really nice thick electro house bass. There's lots you could do with this as well. You could definitely take this and put a lot of external processing on it and all that good stuff. This is just a really good template for that kind of like heavy like French electro house bass. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and initialize the patch. As always guys, these videos are supported by my website, and you guys supported me by checking that out. Definitely go ahead and check that out if you have the time over at synthhacker.com, or click the link in the description below to go check out my presets for Massive. Currently I have a sale on the Mega Pack still, which contains all of my separate products at like a really reduced price. So definitely go ahead and check that out if you haven't done already. But yeah, thanks a lot in advance if you do decide to check that out, and let's get making this sound. So the first thing we're going to do is actually start off in the routing tab. We're going to be using two inserts in the sound. We're going to be using one insert one after the filter one, and then we're going to place insert two just before the effect, so the whole signal is being passed through that, apart from one oscillator which we're actually going to bypass. And usually when we bypass an oscillators, it's usually because we want to bypass one of the oscillators, which is like our sub oscillator, so it doesn't get like affected by anything. But what I actually chose to do for this sound was actually bypass the noise oscillator, so that it would bypass all the inserts that we put in, because we are going to be using some quite extreme drive settings on the sine shaper, like full actually. And when you put just like white noise through a fully wet like sine shaper, it just sounds like way too much. Like it really just pulls out all the noise and just kind of dominates the sound a bit too much. But typically these sounds do have a little bit of noise on top. So what I decided to do was just bypass that there. So that's it for the routing tab. In the voicing tab, we want to make sure that the sound is monophonic, obviously, because it is a bass sound, and we're just going to leave it on one voice of unison, and just make sure that the sound has no glide as well, and we don't need vibrato in this sound either. So going into the oscillator section then, we're going to be using all three oscillators, and the modulation oscillator and the noise oscillator. I'm going to try go through these fairly quick, otherwise it's going to take a lot of time. But oscillator 1, we're going to be using the VA-PWM wavetable, and we're going to pull the pulse saw position to the left, and same with the pulse width. We're going to keep the amplitude full, and we're going to route this through filter 1 and leave it at the default octave. In oscillator 2, we're going to be pitching this down -12 semitones, so one whole octave. We're going to be using the square saw 2 wavetable, and we're going to keep this all the way to the right, so we're just basically getting a saw wave from this oscillator. Again, just keep it on a spectrum. We want intensity to be full, amplitude to be full. But what we're going to actually do is route this through filter 2, because we're going to use two separate filters to layer this sound together, which should be really cool. I'll show you the effect that has in a second. And then oscillator 3, just to provide some really solid low end to the sound, we're going to be using the sine triangle wavetable position, and we're going to pull this all the way to the left, so this is just basically a sine wave. So here we just have a sine wave to provide the low end, a saw wave at the same octave to provide some grittiness to the low end, and then also a higher up oscillator, which is using the like more of a pulse waveform really. And also again, just make sure that oscillator 3 is being routed just straight through filter 2. Then in our modulation oscillator, we're going to use a phase modulation effect. We're going to pitch this down minus 12 semitones, and what we're going to do is actually use this to modulate the phase of oscillator 1, which produces this really kind of like modern FM sound. But we're going to bring this right down, and what we're going to do is set up an envelope on the actual phase amount, and it's the same envelope we're going to be using in the filter section as well, so we might as well set that up now. So if I use envelope 3, it doesn't really matter as long as you're not using envelope 4, which is the amplitude envelope. And we're going to bring the attack all the way down like that. We're going to push the decay up a little bit, bring the sustain right down to somewhere around here, and then give it a little bit of release like so. And then simply just drag and drop it onto the phase modulation amount, and then just bring it up a little bit like that. So at the start of the sound, we'll get this like really kind of sharp like FM sound, and then over time it'll kind of like drag out, which gives us this really nice kind of like textural movement, which is really cool. Moving on to the noise oscillator, we're going to be using the tape hiss noise. We're going to bring the color back a little bit, so we don't want it to be too bright. And just give it a little bit of amplitude. Like I said, this is quite a noisy sound anyway, so we just want this to kind of layer on top just to fill out the frequency range. We don't want it to be like really like way too harsh. So just before moving into the filter sections, we'll set up the inserts, and then I'll demonstrate the sound just before we get into the filter. I used the sine shaper distortion and really cranked this, so I put full drive and full dry wet. And then for insert 2, this is actually a filter that I use just to tame the sound. Like I said, insert 2 here is just before the effects. And yeah, I use this to kind of tame this kind of extreme distortion, because otherwise this would just sound like a bit too, well, completely too harsh. So just putting an insert before the effects with an extra filter is a really cool trick to kind of tame back sounds that you've put quite extreme effects on, or use quite extreme modulation and so on. So we want to make sure the high pass filter's all the way down. We're going to bring the low pass filter down to here, and then we're just going to use the same envelope we already set up on this low pass filter as well, and push that up. So now we have this sound. Which, you know, it's kind of got the basic tone there, but it's still not as fat as what we're looking for, and it's kind of like missing a lot. So to kind of make up for this, we're going to move into the filter section and do some really cool stuff. So the first thing we're going to do, filter 1, we're actually going to set up a double notch filter. We're going to bring the resonance back a little bit. This control in the middle doesn't do anything, as you can see it says NA. And then we're going to push the cutoff up a little bit and have some really kind of slight modulation on this. And what this will basically do is mean that it's kind of using like a notch filter, and what we're doing with this envelope is we're sweeping it through the frequency range, so you get this really cool like notch movement, which is actually a really common technique used for making like neuro basses and stuff like that as well. And then filter 2, the reason the sound then sounded a bit thin is because we can't hear any of these two oscillators, because filter 2's volume is all the way down. So we're going to pull this up, and then what we're going to make sure we have is an equal mix between both these filters. And then for filter 2, we're going to use a low pass 4 dB filter, a 4-pole filter, which is 24 dB per octave. And then we're going to push the cutoff of this up. We're not going to put an envelope on it or anything like that. We're just using it to tame the higher frequencies from oscillator 2, really. And then we're going to pull the resonance down, and now we have this. And that's sounding much more full already. It's much closer to the sound that we're looking for. So moving on then, let's move into the filter section. The first effect that we're going to use, which really kind of drastically changes the sound and makes it sound much fuller, is of course the dimension expander. I use this on a lot of bass sounds really to make them a lot thicker and a lot bigger. And I've seen some people, or I've looked at other people's like sounds at the Maven Massive and other tutorials and stuff like that. They have the size quite big and then the dry wet quite small. But I really find that if you have the size really small, but then the dry wet up like just less than halfway, this has, for me, the kind of like best effect. I'll quickly show you what this does. So that's with it off. So you can really hear the difference that makes. So that's just a really cool effect if you want to kind of make something sound a lot bigger. Next, we're going to use a really simple, just small reverb. We're just going to bring the size down a little bit and the dry wet down a little bit. And this, like I said, is just going to kind of put the sound in a space, kind of similar to the Dimension Expander does, because it is quite a small reverb size. But yeah, it's just going to kind of put it in a space. You could use this reverb, or you could use an external one. If you've got a favorite, it's completely up to you. And the other thing that I actually forgot to do was raise this bypass control volume, and because the noise is being passed through the bypass, so if this is all the way down, we're actually not going to hear it. So just push this up to make sure that we're hearing the noise as well. And also, because this is using the amplitude envelope as well as the whole sound is using the same amplitude envelope here, we're just going to set this up now as well. We're just going to keep it as is, really full sustain. We want the volume of the sound to stay the same, but we do want a little bit of release at the end there as well. So now we have this. And then finally, just to do some added tweaking at the end, we're going to boost the low shelf a little bit, just to boost the bottom end a little bit. Like I said, it's actually a shame in Massive that you can't bypass more than one oscillator. I don't know why it makes you choose between. That seems kind of silly to me. Because like ideally, bypassing the noise oscillator and the sub oscillator as well, because it's going to lose some of the low end when it's being passed through all this distortion and so on. So yeah, you can just kind of make up for this by just boosting the low shelf at the bottom, or you could just use a separate instance of Massive. It's completely up to you. So we're going to boost that low end there, and then we're also going to boost the high shelf significantly to really add some nice crispness to the sound. One extra thing you can do as well, just to make sure that each kind of note that's played is exactly the same, you can switch this restart via gate option here, which means that the phase of each waveform is going to be starting at the exact same point every time a note is played, so you get a more kind of consistent sound. Sometimes it sounds good, so try it out, but sometimes you kind of get this like laser zapping effect, which isn't very nice. And I wouldn't recommend doing this for more kind of like organic sounds like leads. But for harsh sounds like this, that you want to sound really, really consistent every time a note's pressed, then you want to switch this on. Definitely play around with the phase modulation depth as well. This is something that you can kind of adjust to taste, really. If you want a more modulated sound, you can really push this. If you want it to be more subtle, obviously you can bring it down a little bit. But yeah, that's pretty much the sound, guys. So hopefully you found this video useful. I'm a big fan of Justice and Lemaitre as well. Really cool sounds. They both use like these really kind of like aggressive electro house sounds that I absolutely love. Typically probably using analog gear, but that doesn't mean we can't create similar things using digital tools like Massive. But yeah, that's pretty much the video, guys. So thanks a lot for watching. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to leave them down below. Subscribe to stay up to date with new tutorials as always, and yeah, go check out my website as well if you haven't done so already, over at synthhacker.com, or the link in the description down below to go check out my presets for Massive, and I really do appreciate that, guys. So yeah, that's all from me. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.